Hi everyone. So I haven't spoke about this subject for quite a while because, in the grand scheme of things, I think there's more important things going on in the world. Um, some of them not documented as much as they should be. Apparently, a couple of days ago, 500 people died in airstrikes in Sudan, and yeah, that's a periphery story. It's not going to get the same attention even as other conflicts. I'm just making the point that there are more important things going on in the world, but so long as it is in the media domain, in the public psyche, then yeah, this is my take on it. Basically, I haven't changed my view, and I think that it's sort of a case when it comes to Harry and Meghan of digging themselves deeper each time, and I don't think they see it. So LBC had a piece on Meghan talking about being the most bullied person in the world. In the world. Well, firstly, we need to look at what bullying is. I abhor bullying. I abhor genuine bullying. I see it as a targeted abuse of an individual that is really trying to wear them down, really trying to vitriolically attack them, um, if it's undeserved. I mean, there may be times when someone is hated and with good reason. You know, they could be a really dangerous criminal or something, but yeah, I mean, you could consider that online abuse when someone is vitriolically attacked on a personal basis. But I would argue politicians have to put up with much worse than what Megan does. If you look at her own platforms, it's all positive comments. So this notion that she's somehow a victim of targeted bullying, I do take that um with some doubt. Has she been heavily criticized? Yes. Is that pleasant to hear? I'm sure it's not. But maybe just for once, she should self reflect and think, is some of this maybe my own fault? And this is, I think, the problem that people have with Meghan Markle and Harry. You know, it's both of them. Um, in fact, in some ways, I think Harry's worse because he was the royal insider and he should have known that you can't have it both ways. You can't demand to keep royal titles and royal privileges and royal protection, but not be carry out the duties of a full working royal. Um, I think that's the underlying issue here. You know, a lot of their supporters conflate criticism with bullying. It's not the same thing at all, because if you're going to say that public figures shouldn't be criticized, then where do you draw the line? No public figure should be criticized then. You know, um, Harry and Meghan are not the only celebrities, and that's really what they are nowadays, who get criticized. Um, You know, I actually did have some sympathy with them in the beginning because I've always thought the behavior of the paparazzi is vile. And, you know, not so much the paparazzi, but I do think the tabloid press can be abhorrent sometimes in their behavior. So I was willing to play the devil's advocate and say, okay, there may be something in this, and they want privacy, so, you know, best wishes to them. But I think what people find really galling um, is the constant complaining. You know, South Park had, that's not something I usually watch, but they had a little skit which showed Harry and Meghan on a worldwide privacy tour, i.e., the irony of saying that they want privacy whilst constantly doing their level best to keep in the public eye. I don't think it's too far-fetched to think that in both cases you have Harry, who, by his own admission, you know, what was his book called? Spare. He always felt that he was second fiddle to William. He always felt that he was sidelined. So it sort of makes sense that he wants to keep in the public eye. He wants to stay relevant. Now, he's done some good things. I give him credit for the Invictus Games. That was a good initiative. They've both done charity work. You know, I don't criticize any of that. Um, but there is a fundamental contradiction. You either want privacy or you don't. And I think people look at it and say, wait a second, you want to get to the United States to get more privacy. Yet you have been in the press ever since. And this isn't just a case of, you know, there's some rumours being churned out and they have to refute them. Fair enough. If they're false rumours, they would have to refute them. They themselves have engineered the fact that they're in the public eye by doing podcasts, by getting books published, by I think for me that the icing on the cake was that awful Oprah interview. And Oprah, frankly, has to take some of the blame herself because what was that? It was an interview in which this very privileged young couple essentially trashed their own family in front of millions of people. Now, her supporters talk about bullying. What's that? I mean, the royal family are not going to be in a position where they're going to just sit down and do rival interviews. It doesn't work that way. You know, why would a 1,000-year-old institution degrade itself by getting into a soap opera, by doing rival interviews? And say, oh no, they're liars, that we aren't doing that, or we aren't this or that. It's I think a lot of people in Britain were angry with the smear, not just against the royal family, but more broadly against this country. I mean, Meghan Markle has essentially portrayed Britain as a racist country. And I've always said we have racism, but frankly, a lot of people find it ungrateful because when the royal wedding happened in 2018, by the way, with a lot of public expense, um, and security and so on, they were welcomed. She was welcomed. I remember that royal wedding. It was a huge event. All the papers, all of them, were glowing in their, praise of Meghan, how beautiful she looked, and this is her new bride, and it's a new royal family, and it was all positive. Um, and I'm willing to say that maybe there was some media manipulation. Um, but every member of the royal family faces pressure. I think I find her supporters irritating as well because they always portray her as a victim. Yet they have no problem lapping up everything she says about the royal family. So people say, oh, it's awful, she's bullied. No woman in the world is so vilified. Yet I'm willing to bet that the people who support her have no problem believing William is terrible and Catherine is terrible and the king is terrible. So they're complaining that she gets vilified, yet they have no problem vilifying the people that she attacks. There's two sides to every story. And you might say, oh, well, the royal family could defend themselves if they want. They're not going to sit down to interviews and, degrade the situation even more. Why would they? I think that would be very sleazy and very, very sad, actually, to see a family tear itself apart by rival interviews. So, frankly, I think William and Catherine and the King um, rose above that. You know, have they handled everything well? Have they handled everything as well as they could have done? Maybe not. Maybe they made some mistakes, right? I'm willing to accept that maybe there were times there were strained relations with William and Harry, and maybe sometimes William was at fault. I'm prepared to say that, okay? Because I've had my own problems with my siblings. It's normal part of family life. It happens. I'm not going to say, oh, it's all Harry's fault and William's perfect. I'm not going to say that. Apparently, he has a temper problem. There may be times when William was wrong. But what I think is disgusting, frankly, is Harry's decision to trash his own family essentially in that interview. For me, that was just, if I had any sympathy, I lost most of it then. I think that was really sleazy, really, it's like Jeremy Kyle on steroids. I mean, that was just, so their supporters need to understand the reason people have a problem with Harry and Meghan isn't because we're just lapping up everything that the media says. It's because of the perception that they want it both ways. They want a life of privacy. They themselves do everything they can to keep in the public domain. I am not saying here that they have absolutely no ground for complaint whatsoever, but I am saying that people take a dim view when they see this wealthy, privileged young couple constantly complaining. Constantly. Indeed, their work with charities in developing countries, Harry should know that there's people who have it much worse than they do because of his own work. He should know that. I think one of the most obnoxious things is when Meghan actually compared herself to struggles of Nelson Mandela. I mean, and Mandela's own family rebuked that. I mean, marrying a prince versus spending 27 years in prison against an unjust system, it's hardly the same thing. And that's why people have a problem with this pair. I mean, they're two of the most famous people in the world. They have made themselves that way to a large extent. Um, I will say, I think Americans are starting to get tired of them as well. Because initially, a lot of left-wing Americans, probably they still do, they lapped it all up. They were a symbol of progressiveness, and Harry had reinvented himself as being very woke and very, progressive, largely due to his wife's politics. And that's why they sort of became darlings of the American left. They were even honored by the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Center, which I thought was absurd. No disrespect to the late F. L. Kennedy, but I thought that was a really bad decision. I don't think they deserved it. Um, so, yeah, they were darlings of the American left. But it may be even the American left start to get tired of them now. Um, I think what they need to do is really, really step back a little bit and reflect, what exactly do we want here? Because it's a cycle. Every time they do an interview, every time they do a podcast, every time they publish a new book, it just gives more fodder for speculation, for media rebuttals, for accusations. It's like a whole cycle. If they would just, I would say they've got a right to defend themselves if there's accusations made that may or may not be true. One of them, for example, is that Meghan herself behaved in a somewhat bullying way. Her supporters said that was just an American managerial style. Apparently, her staff in the UK said she was very difficult to work with. But again, who knows what's true? Some of this could be tabloid fodder. Some of it could just be rumours. But I have a problem with saying we'll give them the benefit of the doubt when it comes to rumours, not the people they attack, i.e., the royal family, British journalists. There's no benefit of the doubt given to them. People just lap it up. So I think their supporters are hypocrites as well. They preach about bullying, ignoring the fact that by doing that Oprah interview, they themselves were arguably engaging in a form of bullying against the royal family. I mean, look at what Catherine went through with her cancer situation, all the false rumours that she had to put up with. William had to endure the fact that his father and his wife were both uh, sick, within months of each other. In fact, simultaneously, not just sick, both had cancer. And William had to shoulder all the pressure of media scrutiny from that. And I feel, I'm not going to say William's perfect. I'm sure he has his flaws. I've heard he has a temper problem. I have to say, I like William because I think he handles things in such a diplomatic way, and he carries himself well, I believe. Um, and this is another point. Harry and Meghan are not the only members of the royal family who's faced pressure. Pretty much every member of the royal family has. I mean, William had to put up with all sorts of tabloid fodder about being lazy, which I think was rubbish. Um, all members of the royal family get pressure. Harry and Meghan seem to think they're the only ones. Again, this taps into a very self-indulged mindset. And sort of contradictory because they do a lot of charity work. I'm not saying everything they do is bad. I do give Harry credit for the Invictus Games, but I think people just take a dim view of a wealthy, privileged young couple who are constantly, constantly, constantly complaining. Constantly. I mean, that doesn't go down well. It looks like narcissism. And I'm not a psychologist, I can't diagnose them that way, but that's what it looks like. And people are fed up with it. I think what people particularly resent is the way they've smeared this country essentially as racist. I think people find that particularly galling when this country welcomed Meghan Markle. Um, I also wonder how do African American people feel about her constantly appropriating that. I mean, Meghan Markle's mixed race. That's her ethnic background. But she constantly portrays herself as a woman of color. I wonder how they feel about that. I mean, maybe some of them will lap it up, maybe some of them won't. I don't know. But I certainly struggle to see Meghan Markle as a black woman. Um, I see her as a mixed race woman because that's what she is. But I mean, as an example of what I'm talking about, the whole thing about a member of the royal family asked what race the child was. Well, most people in Britain saw that as a normal question. Like, will you know, uh, will the child look like their father or their mother? That is something that people ask when a child is born. It's an innocent question. Harry and Meghan turned that into some sort of sinister racial thing. It's just, and that's what people find really, really galling. There's actual persecution going on in this world. There's actual racism going on in this world. So people find it galling that they would take something like that and portray it as this deep, sinister thing. It's just, I'm guessing what probably happened is a member of the royal family, and incidentally, by not naming that person, they just fueled rumours. But let's say it was, I don't know, the Duke of Edinburgh, although they said it wasn't. But again, this is a problem, isn't it? By not saying who it was, they just fuel rumours. So they say a member of the royal family. Okay, so that leaves a rumour mill open. It could be anyone. Um, had racial overtones by asking if the baby would look more like their mother or father. I'm thinking what happened was in a very innocent, moment, they said, "Oh, I wonder will they look more like the mother or the father?" People say, "Oh, well, they have the mother's eyes, the father's, whatever, nose." That's what people say. It's not a sinister racist thing. And it makes me angry that people with nothing better to do decide to get hypersensitive about that on behalf of Harry and Meghan. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up because there are more important things going on in the world, and I'll be making other videos about other subjects. But I want to just put it out there. I don't say that there's absolutely no grounds whatsoever for any of their complaints. I'm sure they have had pressure. I'm sure at times the media has been obnoxious. And, I abhor the paparazzi. I think they're stalkers. So I sympathize with Harry and Meghan to an extent. But I think they lost a lot of the goodwill that a lot of people had towards them with their attitude, with their constant self pity, um, and by basically being hypocrites, by wanting it both ways, by wanting a private life, but then not showing that when they'll use the media when it suits them. To be fair, Diana was also accused of this on some level. It has to be said, Princess Diana was sometimes accused of using the media when it suited her, although she was hounded, of course, excessively so, much, much worse than Harry and Meghan. Um, but perhaps a lot of people in public life are guilty of that. Um, that's the price of fame. It's a hard thing. And I don't say that justifies the paparazzi. I think the paparazzi are despicable. Harry and Meghan have a right to be concerned about the security around the paparazzi. But it isn't just the paparazzi we're talking about. They will interpret any media criticism as bullying, as if it's fine for them to make accusations and smear people. But when criticism turns on them, oh, it's bullying if it's us. I'm sorry, but that is hypocrisy. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. That's how I feel about it.